I was shocked when I saw the first episode of the Swordsmith Village arc. Sumiyoshi's eyes and hair, it was already starting to turn red. And just like Yoriichi, he was a child of brightness. This is incredible, because this means that he didn't become a child of brightness like Yoriichi while inheriting the sun-breathing technique. This theory goes out the window. So was it just a coincidence that they both had red eyes and red hair? I doubt it. You see, we learned that Tanjiro is the child of brightness in the very beginning when he gets his sword. So I find it hard to believe this was all just a coincidence. And in Demon Slayer, we can see this clearly in the anime. The color of each character's eyes are all different, unless they're family. For instance, Tanjiro Kamado and Tanjiro Kamado, Kyojuro Rengoku and Shinjiro Rengoku. By that logic, is Sumiyoshi Yoriichi's son? But that can't be. Yoriichi only had one child with Uta, and unfortunately the child passed away before being born. So there's no way Sumiyoshi is his son, but Yoriichi, he has a twin brother who has the same eye color. I'm talking about Kokushibo, aka Michikatsu. Michikatsu had 2 kids. We saw this in the original manga. Remember this scene when he abandons his wife and kids? The baby we see here, maybe this was Sumiyoshi. And the other child, maybe this was Tokito. And the baby on the left was Kamado. If this is true, it would make sense that the father from the Tokito family and Tanjiro both have red eyes. But then, when we think about their age, it might be a reach to say that Sumiyoshi was Michikatsu's child. I understand that, but back in those times, people got married at age 15 all the time. So if Michikatsu got married at 15 and had kids right away, in this scene we see here, Yoriichi would be 30. This is if he got married at 15, but even if he was a few years older, he'd still be in his 30s. He seems very mature already, and seeing the way he talks to Sumiyoshi, who already had kids, it's not hard to imagine that he was in his 30s at this point. So I don't think age is a big problem here. It's explainable. Moving on to our next question. Is Sumiyoshi's last name Tsukikuni? Not necessarily. Michikatsu, who we assume to be Sumiyoshi's father, he abandoned his family, quit the Demon Slayer Corps, killed the Oyakata-sama, and turned into a demon. And just like Yoriichi was kicked out of the Demon Slayer Corps for this, Kokushibo's wife and kids? It's very likely that they got kicked out of the Tsukikuni family as well. But if a family turns into a demon, wouldn't they have to perform seppuku instead? Yoriichi never did that, and this rule only applies to members of the Demon Slayer Corps, so I can only hope that they didn't force his family to do this. And Michikatsu's father, he passed away right around when Michikatsu got married, so this means whether they were punished for Michikatsu's actions or not, they lost everything the moment Michikatsu left them, including their last name. And they most likely got kicked out of the family, and the baby who got exiled, maybe this was Sumiyoshi. Sumiyoshi has red eyes and red hair because Michikatsu is his father. That's why he's the child of brightness. That means Kokushibo and Tanjiro, they're related by blood. And here's another interesting fact. When they both turn into a demon, pay attention to their bruises. It's exactly the same. Coincidence? I don't think so. And most importantly, if Sumiyoshi was Michikatsu's son, many of the questions surrounding the sun-breathing technique would be answered. It would connect all the dots. And looking at the history of the Child of Brightness going up to the Taisho era, Michikatsu and Yoriichi are twins, so they're both Child of Brightness. Michikatsu's son, Sumiyoshi, he was born as a Child of Brightness as well. But due to his father's actions, Sumiyoshi, who was still a baby at the time, lost his last name. Also, maybe he lost his first name as well. That means Sumiyoshi used to have a different name. Years later, Sumiyoshi ends up with Suyako. They were wandering around looking for an empty house to live in, so at that point, I don't think they were selling charcoal. Then they found Yoriichi's abandoned house, made it their own, then they started living there and started selling charcoal for a living. Then he had a child with Suyako. By the way, the name Kamado, maybe he came up with the name because he started selling charcoal. Back in those days, some farmers already had last names, so it's possible. I don't know who came up with the last name. Maybe it was Sumiyoshi, or maybe it was his child. Either way, years later during the Taisho era, Tanjiro, who's related to Michikatsu and Sumiyoshi by blood, he's also a child of brightness, and he looks very similar to Sumiyoshi. He was also born with that bruise. And he knew how to use the sun-breathing technique. Maybe this is because he had Yoriichi Tsugikuni's blood. So this means Tanjiro isn't a reincarnation of Yoriichi. Instead, he was family. This would explain why he was able to use the sun-breathing technique, and it would make a great storyline. The sun-breathing technique Kokushibo was so obsessed with, it was with his family all along. In the second episode of the Swordsmith Village arc, Tanjiro said, "I may not be able to do it, but the kids might." That's deep. Like Tanjiro said, Michikatsu, maybe he should have put his trust in future generations. Kokushibo and Tanjiro, their paths never crossed. But if they had, maybe Tanjiro could have helped him out. He met Muichiro, but he couldn't help him. But it never happened. He abandoned his family, so Kokushibo kept searching for the answer to the end. But he never found it. He ended up with 6 eyes, but he could never find the answer to the question, why was I born? But Tanjiro, I think he knew the answer. Demon Slayer is a story about inheritance. Tanjiro could use the Hinokami Kagura and the sun-breathing technique, but then he was struck with an illness, so he inherited his skills to his son Tanjiro. And another thing to remember, Tanjiro didn't give him the strength of the sun-breathing technique. Instead, he passed down the idea of Hinokami Kagura. It wasn't about power. Pretty deep, right? But if I'm wrong about all of this, and Sumiyoshi wasn't Michikatsu's child, even then, maybe his other child or their children married a Kamado. Then the Kunitsugu blood will be passed down to Tanjiro and Tanjiro. Then it would all make sense again. But you may be saying, why would anyone from the Tsugikuni family, a family of warriors, marry a Kamado? Well, after Michikatsu abandoned his family, his kids got kicked out of the family, so technically they weren't a Kunitsugu anymore. Also, more importantly, whether or not they were kicked out, the fact is Michikatsu's child married a Tokito. The Tokitos are Kikoris, lumberjacks, so they're in the same class as the Kamados, so it's possible for Michikatsu's child to marry a Kamado. Again, this is all just speculation, but the heartwarming message from the Children of Brightness really got to me. Allow me to explain. First, the Children of Brightness are Yoriichi, Tanjiro, and Tokito's father. Are they special? Are they all strong? Is there a pattern? Let's take a look. I'll look at their abilities and their track record against demons. Yoriichi scores high in both. He did lose Muzan, but still, it's still impressive. Tanjiro is highly skilled as well, but in the story we never see him fight a demon. And his son Tanjiro, He wasn't really born with an extraordinary ability. Instead, he's the type that works harder than anyone else. And he's taken out demons in the upper class, so he's at the top of the list for sure. And Tokito's father? He slipped down a cliff and died, so I wouldn't say he's very skilled in combat. And we never see him take out a demon. So why didn't they make Muichiro the child of brightness? That would have made things much more interesting. But think about it. The 4 characters I just talked about, they're all different. They have almost nothing in common. If I was the author, I'd just make everyone who's a child of brightness really strong, but Demon Slayer is no ordinary tale. But these 4 do have something in common, whether they're big or small, strong or not. They all take good care of their families. They all live and do things for others. We see this in every one of them, like Tokito's father. He went out to get medicine for his family even though it was storming outside. Unfortunately, he passed away in the process. Maybe he didn't die in an epic battle against a demon, but he did it all for his family. That'll never change. And in that sense, him and Rengoku, they're not so different. Wouldn't you agree? Being a child of brightness, it's not about power. It's about where your heart is. There are countless battles in Demon Slayer, but the message behind it isn't about power. The most important thing in life is caring and doing things for others. I'm just an ordinary guy, and I don't have any special skills or power, but when I watch Demon Slayer, it reminds me that taking good care of those who are closest to you, that's the most important thing. And when you do that, your heart burns bright red. That's it for today. See you in the next video. That's all for now. For more Demon Slayer theories, please like and subscribe for more videos. See you soon.